So with SketchUp, what I want to show you how to do today is creating a staircase. And so a staircase, I think, is a pretty fundamental thing that probably a lot of you are going to want to do in a building. And so to start off, I'm going to start by creating a box for the floor. So let's make this a decent size here. We're going to extrude this box up. We're going to extrude it up 12, so 12 inches. And I actually made this box really big. Let's actually make that a little smaller. And let's extrude this up 12 inches. One foot, so that's a little bit better of a thickness. Then I'm just going to group this. Make group. And then I'm going to copy this up. So I'm going to use the move tool. And we're going to click and start to move it. And we're moving it in the blue axis, which is the vertical line. And if we hit the control button on the keyboard, it's going to create a copy of that. And then we're going to hit enter. And I actually didn't, yeah, okay, we got that copy. I didn't hit enter yet, actually. And I'm just actually going to type in 10 feet here. So we're going to have 10 feet floor to floor. And I guess these floors are still massive. But what I'm going to do with this top floor, I am going to explode it. Click our pointer tool. We're going to explode this, and I'm just going to make this a new group. So we have two kind of separate groups there. We have the lower floor and the upper floor. And when it comes to doing stairs, unfortunately, we're going to have to do a little math, but I want to walk you through what my math is and how I would structure that. So first thing we want to do is we want to measure from our upper floor to our lower floor, from top line to top line. And we obviously made that 10, so we already know what that is. And we can use the measure tool to measure that just to verify. So that's 10 feet. And so here's where the math part comes in. And you can see some of my math here I had before. So let's start by understanding 10 feet. So 10 feet is in feet, obviously. And when it comes to stairs, we typically want to use a number around 7 inches as our rise. Typically, max code is around 7 5/8, so 7.5 inches. And so I usually start with my riser count at 7 because it's a good number in the middle. I'm also a taller person, and so I know having a taller stair for me is not a big deal. But if you're a little bit shorter, maybe a taller stair. So we try to keep ours around 7 because I think it's a good medium number. So what we want to do is we want to figure out how many stairs or how many steps in height we have for that 10 feet of difference from floor to floor. And so we have 7 inches and we have 10 feet. So the first thing we want to do is convert our feet into inches. So we're going to type in 10 times 12. And so we have 120 inches. The next thing we're going to do is divide by 7. And so we have 17 risers. So we have 17 steps between our first floor and our second floor. And so with this, we have a decimal. Because I used a number around 7 inches, we can round down. If you start with 7.5 inches, you may not be able to round down. So because we can't go over the code maximum of 7 5/8. So if you start at 7.5, you would likely have to do that. So we could try that. So we could go 120 divided by 7.5. And so we have 16 as maybe our low number and 17 as our high number. Conveniently enough, 16 actually works perfectly. But let's use 17. So what we're going to do is do the reverse. So we're going to do 120 divided by 17. And so that's going to give us a little over 7 inches in height, right? So how much over? We're going to minus 7 inches. And that's going to leave us just with the decimal place only. We're going to multiply that by 16. The reason why we're going to multiply it by 16 is 1/16 of an inch. We could also multiply it by 32, but for the intents and purposes, do 16. So multiply that by 16, and we're just under 1. So what that means is our riser height is 7 1/16. When it comes to 1/16 of an inch, you can almost think about 1/16 as being very close to a millimeter. Contractor's not really going to be able to measure that accurately. They're going to be very close. So good place to start. So we have around 7 1/16 for a rise. The next thing we need to do is figure out our run. And so we have 17 stairs. Typically our runs per code are usually around 11 inches. So 11 inches long, and we need 17 of those. So let's do that math. So 11 times 17. We have 187 inches. We could obviously figure this out in feet, so I could divide by 12, and we have a little bit over 15 feet. But because in SketchUp it doesn't really matter if we work in feet or inches, I'm just going to take that 187 mark, and I'm going to go along here. So let's go here. We're going to go to our bottom point, and we're going to draw another line that's 187. And 187. And so this is now the length of our stairs. And so what we want to do now is start creating those steps. So our first step here, we're going to go up 7 1/16. 7 1/16 of an inch, and we're going to go over 11. And the best part of this is we got to do it 17 more times. I'm partially kidding because we're going to copy it, but I mean, you could do that if that was something that you wanted to do. I don't know why, but we're going to select this, and you notice when I select just in that area, I'm only selecting the steps. I'm not selecting that bottom line. So we can use the copy button, and we can click our bottom point, and we'll hit the control button on the keyboard, and it'll allow us to copy. And I'm going to do it again. And also, if you're wondering, we're not going to do that for everyone. We're going to create a few, and we're going to start this process again, but I'm going to select a bigger amount, and that way we don't have to copy them up as much, and we don't have to be here all day doing that. So let's copy this one. Hit the control button again. Let's copy and do it again here. And for this last one, this conveniently worked out to be really close. I could just copy this past and then just delete the unnecessary ones. But what you see there is you actually see that we are actually higher than our step, and that's actually not a problem. And so what the building code says is as long as you don't have more than a 1/4 inch of difference between your top stair and your bottom stair, that's allowed per code. And so what we want to do is when we get to the top here, we want to measure, oh, and it actually looks like I didn't copy that very well. So let's move that back down. So yeah, it's actually way less than that. So that's actually good. So we want to measure this last one from the top of our floor to this, and we have 1/16 of an inch, so we're way under that. And so what we want to do here is we just want to draw a new line from this point over to our line on this side, and then we're going to erase those top lines. So again, code says that we can have a 1/4 inch difference, and honestly, I would call a 1/16 as 0. It's really like negligible because it's just going to be like a tiny little hairline bigger. So from a code perspective, we did a very good job at getting those really consistent. One of the stories I told my previous class, when I was at Lawrence Tech, I did a study abroad. It wasn't like a big month-long thing. It was like a 10-day workshop, and we were in a hostel in Albania, and so I actually did it twice, and we were in the same hostel for both times. And even coming back from the afternoon, not necessarily the evening, if you get what I'm saying, there was one step that was like 8 inches, and the rest were like 7. And every day, someone would trip on that step. And so, from a code perspective, that's why we have those rules in place, so that people don't trip unintentionally on steps that should, be uniform. So there we go. We have our steps here, and because we closed that last step, we actually have. Do we actually go all the way down? Sweet. I do not know what I did there. That's fine. Obviously, you'd want to fix that, but let's extrude this out. So let's go out 40 inches. The reason why I'm doing 40 inches is 40 inches is a code requirement, and so 40 inches is the maximum or minimum width for staircases in Ontario. So it was around 3 feet, but it's got changed recently in the code. And I think that's just to allow a more proper staircase. So I think it's actually a little bit less. It's like 39 or something like that, but we'll just call it 4 inches for all intents and purposes. And so there we go. We have a staircase. 2 things left to do. One is we need to cut a hole in the floor because, if there's no hole, how are we going to get up to the next floor? And so there actually is a code requirement for that. So what I'm going to do from the bottom of the floor, so something you got to think about, you don't want to do the top, and when you're designing a building, you want to make sure you account for that floor thickness. So we're just gonna draw a line down here, and we want to go down 6'8", and so 6'8" is the code requirement for height clearance when you're going up and down a stair. I myself am tall, so I don't experience it that often, but you think about your grandmother's house that was built like 50 years ago, and you go down in the basement and you hit your head on the edge or almost hit your head. It feels very close, and so that's why we have that requirement, is so that you have that proper clearance. And so when we look here, we're very close to this step, and we're actually a little bit under. So we're going to draw an imaginary line up from this step here. So we're going to go to like the next step essentially. So we're going to make that whole 1 stair bigger so that we have that allowable room. And then let's just grab our measure tool. And we're just going to measure from here down to here. So we have 7'2". So that's a really good number. Usually what I would tell people is, there's a couple ways to see it, but usually you can't really lose a lot of steps. So generally if your staircase is so many steps, that's how big your hole is. In our case, it looks like we can lose 2 steps. So you could say 15 or 16 steps are what you're going to have as part of that. The other thing that you notice is the stairs they take up a lot of room. And so I think that's the one thing that I also want to convey is stairs are a very important thing, but they also take up a lot of room. So when you're planning for space, I think it's a great thing to start doing very early on, because then you know how many steps, you know how much space it's going to take up. And so now that we know where that hole needs to be, let's edit our group up here. And we're just going to retrace these lines. So we're going to trace this line here down, and we're going to trace the edge of our staircase here down. And then we're just going to extrude this. So we're going to extrude this all the way to our staircase there. And then we're going to close our group. Close group. And then let's erase these lines that we don't need anymore. I don't want to erase that line. Nope. And down here we've got a couple lines to erase. And erase that line. And then the last thing to do is we need to, we don't necessarily want to keep all this space under our stair. So I'm going to go down, just right here, I'm going to go down maybe, let's go down like 8 inches below here. And then I'm going to do the same up here at the top. We're going to go down 8 inches. And we're going to connect those lines. Where's that line? Just going to connect that line. And then we're going to extend that line all the way down. And you can see that it shows in pink. And then I'm just going to delete this, this line right here. And now we can extrude that in. So we'll extrude this bottom part in. And that helps us create our staircase. So that looks like a pretty normal staircase for our building. So not a super crazy tutorial, but I wanted to show you how to do staircases because I think they're a very important part of buildings. And it also can help you work through space and floor planning and all that kind of stuff. So